So Joshua, being the genius that he was, he spoke to it in these terms, first and second. There's a duality here. There's two basic commandments that are underpinnings of the entire law. I mean, you talk about a genius statement to be able to summarize the complexity of the entire 616 laws in two commandments is pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing that somebody had that kind of insight. Just go up a few verses in chapter 4 of 1 John, verse 21. And this commandment have we from him, that he who loved Yahweh love his brother also. Did you notice the sequence he put there? He who loveth Yahweh love his neighbor, his brother also. Again, the sequence, just like Joshua was talking about, first and second. Love Yahweh, love your neighbor also. It follows in that order. Leviticus 19 and verse 18 says, you shall not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahweh. Now, why did he end it that way? Just remember who told you. Don't forget who it was that said that, And you know what that does? It punctuates it, because if you love Yahweh, the first commandment, and he ends it by saying, I am Yahweh. If you respect that person, you're going to absolutely try to do your best to do what he just said, love your neighbor as yourself, and don't bear any grudge. So that ties together again, respect for him. It's going to make us want to follow whatever commandments that he says. And this is certainly the one we're talking about here. In Matthew, the 7th chapter, and verse 12, therefore all things whatsoever you would that men should do to you, do you even so to them, for this is the law and the prophets. It looks like from this verse that he's leaving out the first commandment, because we just read over in Matthew 22 that he said, on these two hang all the law and prophets. In this verse, it appears to say that just this commandment, doing unto men whatsoever you should have them do unto you, is the single underpinning of the entire law. Well, which is it? Well, so you know that this is true, for this is the law and prophets. You have to go back to Matthew 22 and verse 36 through 39 to find out if that's all there is to it. No, there's more to it than that. So when you come in dealing with scriptures in Bible study, you need to go to scriptures that talk about the same thing to make sure you have the right take on it. And that's the trouble with Paul's writing sometimes. You get over there and it says one thing, you can't just isolate on that one verse and build your religion around that one verse. You have to go to other scriptures and put those together. So the complete picture, yes, it is the law and the prophets, but it's one of those underpinnings of the law and the prophets. The other one is the great commandment. He wouldn't contradict himself. He just didn't explain everything there. And that's what Joshua did in the New Testament, or what we call the New Testament. He didn't record every single law that's in the first 5 books of the law. He didn't reproduce all of those in the New Testament. People are supposed to know those. So sometimes when people say, well, I don't see all those commandments over there in the New Testament, so I'm not going to believe it. He didn't have to reproduce all of them. They've got a copy, it's first 5 books of it. That's just a point to make there about putting scriptures together to get the right answer, to get the complete answer to something that's said. You can't always go by a single verse. Maybe even 2 verses is not enough. It might take several scriptures to really put it all together. So just to wind it up there, there's 2 great commandments, and you don't know how to keep either one of them unless you have this book, because it's not in the human being that walks to know innately what the law, how we're supposed to react. Now, we always are guided by one thing. Doesn't mean it's always right, but we're always guided by the urge for self-survival. Survival is a basic built-in mechanism in the human being. All of us have that. And sometimes because of that motivation, people will step all over other people's rights because they're just concerned about themselves. Just concerned about themselves. And as a result, what they do is they break that commandment of not loving their neighbor as themselves. And when you look at it from that standpoint, it's difficult. Well, we all see it, and I'm sure we all been guilty too. But when you see certain things like that, it does irk us, But sometimes we're guilty likewise. I want to end on this point. This is the land Sabbath coming up. And if, as it says, now situations come up recently has made me think about this. If somebody needs something and you say the 7th year is at hand, see, because you just have a year to collect it. You don't have 7 years to get that debt paid off, to get it back. If the 7th year is at hand, You say, well, I'm thinking, man, I just got a year. I might not be able to collect that in a year. Yahweh says, don't do that. Don't be grieved, but you shall open your hand wide and give him sufficient for his need, even though the 7th year is there. He may not be able to pay you back. If it's an unsecured loan, you can go after it beyond the 7th year. If it is a secured loan, you can't retrieve the debt after the 7th year, but you still have the collateral in your possession. You can keep that. But you know how it is. Sometimes we see people in need, we say we have all these excuses, well, if they'd done this, if they'd done that, done something else. But that's not the point. The point is we're to love our neighbor as ourselves, and I'm going to emphasize this, whether we want to or not. You know, I've heard people talk about like they didn't want to go to the feast one year. I remember a certain case, I don't want to say who it was, but they made themselves go. Why? Because it's the right thing to do, whether they wanted to or not. And sometimes, because of our human nature, and this is where, sooner or later, all of us are going to be tested on some stuff we really value. And we'll have to decide in our heart of hearts, are we going to do the right thing, or are we going to do what we want to do? Yahweh's going to test us on that. We all know that happens. So our object is to apply this law, whether we want to or whether we don't. Yahweh doesn't give us an option.